my friend Tom Viola is here tonight from Broadway Cares Equity Fights AIDS, and I know that they were really concerned this year about, they did the Gypsy of the Year. Have you all been to the Gypsy of the Year pageant, or at least on it? I mean, it's the most amazing, it's the best Broadway show of the year. It happens one night. And I know that we were all concerned, given the state of the economy. Well, Tom said they brought in $3 million last week, which is incredible. So, you know, the community, this is the greatest community. Our next presenter is Sean Strub, who's going to present the next Research in Action Award to Florent Morellet, my friend Florent. He catered my big gay wedding. You know, I was talking to Sean, and I was mentioning his credits, and he said, you don't have to read those, but I'm going to read them. Sean is the founder and advisory editor of Paz magazine. He is well known as an activist, writer, and entrepreneur. He's received numerous awards and honors, including the AIDS Action Foundation's National Leadership Award, the Cielo Latino Compañero Award from the Latino Commission on AIDS, and Being Alive Spirit of Hope Award. And I want to add, he was one of 7 guys in the early days of TAG who in 1991 put a giant condom over Jesse Helm's house. That should always be read at here, so you please welcome Sean.
It is a real privilege to introduce Florent. I not only respect and admire him, but I adore him, and we've been co-conspirators on any number of projects over the years. Most of you know Florent from the restaurant and his sort of effervescent personality there that sort of infused the entire operation. And his work in AIDS has been varied. You know, the restaurant, the menu board behind the counter, Florent would post his CD4 cell count, which was great for those of us who knew what it meant. It was even more important for people who didn't and who learned and who sort of engaged them in what so many of us were struggling with in a different way. And Florent was the sort of activist and pal that when I called him up one day and said that I wanted to bring 100 people with HIV over to the restaurant to take their clothes off for a photograph for the anniversary issue of Paz, he said, well, I can't do it Wednesday. And we quickly made plans. But his work in AIDS, you know, and sort of being part of the struggle against a political environment that has been hostile or beyond hostile and often guided by religious agendas rather than science and common sense, and the battle against the pharmaceutical industrial complex that has become ever more present in all of our lives in so many ways. But Florent has also been an activist in other arenas. He has been a very prominent activist in the fight for reproductive rights. He's been very prominent in the fight for sexual freedoms. He's been very prominent in the fight for choices, end-of-life choices, and the right to die movement. And all of these things, including his activism around AIDS, are about control of our bodies. And Florent is someone who has devoted so much of his life to giving all of us more control over our bodies. And in the broad sense, that's how I think of his work. I think his work in connecting those movements is as important as his work in any individual part of that array of activism. So it's with great pleasure to introduce my pal, Florent.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you, everybody at TAG. This is quite wonderful. My name is Florent. I used to sell soup with an attitude, and a lot of it. I was very lucky to grow up in a family where we talked about everything. And my mother took me out of the closet. I was grateful for her. And being out of the closet, I've always been was essential, and maybe a little too much for my mother now, because we're not supposed to talk about disease, okay? We're French, it's all about the facade, And when I told her I was HIV positive in '87, and like also some other friends, she said, okay, now we understand the way you are, Florent. It's wonderful telling the world about everything, but now you have a restaurant. It's doing great business. You have a lot of employees. You can't put that at risk. You can't tell people that you're HIV positive. And I tried to argue. She said, think about it. I said, okay, I'll think about it. I called her the next day. I said, I thought about it. I can't. And business didn't go down, though, went up. And I think that was one of the greatest things I've ever done. I'm realizing it as the years come, people coming to me, you know, with like wet eyes and say, gosh, you know, when you were so out and put your T-cell, but we put a T-cell like, oh, let's do the T-cells, you know, like, duh. You know. It seems so natural to put the T-cells there. Like, maybe I was stoned that day when I did it, or maybe I was too drunk, who knows? There's so many things that I do in my life that are not thought out, that are just genuine coming out. And also people coming to say, oh, you know, yeah, so this woman, this year we were honored. I'm getting honors left and right. If you close your business, trust me, you get honored. But she reminded me 15 years ago, she called me because somebody told her she needed lunches for HIV women of color who were going to Albany. And I said, sure, you know, chicken is okay, something like that. They're vegetarian. And the food that this woman had were the best food that some of them ever had in their life. And this woman was crying when she told me that. And I said, I don't remember anything, you know. I just told the kitchen to do it. I mean, I don't work up. But it was, you know, one of those things that just seemed so natural. But it was the war at that time. But it was a beautiful war. We were all together doing all those things. And one of the things that I could do that very little people could do is deal with death. Because my family would talk about death at dinner, at lunch. And I was the youngest, and I remember going to the table going to, please, can we not talk about death and dying? No. And my mother would talk about it and say, please, help us when we're going to die. We want this, that, and that. And I would just pull my hair. But when my grandmother died, she died in my arms. I was 24. And it was fantastic. It was the greatest experience. And I was the one telling my mother to get out of the room because she was freaking out. And I thought, you know, that was the best thing to do. And it was. I was totally in control. My grandmother in my arm. So when people started dying and nobody was talking about it, I said, well, hello, could somebody talk to the person? So I was the one saying, you know, not forcing it, but going like, you know, have you thought about, you know, what's going on, really? And that's how eventually I got involved with the Right to Die movement. And I was, you know, one of the first, and still one of the few gays involved in the Right to Die movement. And like Sean said, it's all linked, but you know, always being out. So, you know, today is the same thing. You know, sex addiction is one of my big problems, and I've been talking about it, and being open. People have come to me in the restaurants, telling me to write about me, because sex addiction is what is getting so many young people infected today, and not too many people want to talk about sex addiction. Well, you know. It's good. I mean, Peter Stahl has been incredible with what happened with him and his work. So it's a constant work, and like we said earlier, through the grassroots, through the bottom up. So I'm very glad to be here. It's a constant fight. I will sell soup again one day, probably, and with a lot of attitude again. So thank you, everybody.
I'm going to tell you a story about Florent while they take us a picture.
All right, sharp. Yeah. Towering. Beautiful. Love it. Thank you.